History, we often believe, is a straightforward line. A sequence of dates and names that marches forward from one event to the next. But history is also a tapestry woven from memory, belief, and the powerful, persistent echoes of myth. There are places where time seems to fold in on itself, where the past is not a foreign country but a living presence, a whisper in the air like the mist clinging to an ancient lake. Of all the mythical places, of all the lost kingdoms, few resonate with the strength, majesty, and melancholic beauty of Avalon. It is not simply a legendary island. It is the personification of a dream, the physical manifestation of hope, and the ultimate refuge for magic and heroes in a world that has grown too rational. Avalon is a lingering question in the human soul. Can we ever truly recover the paradise we lost? To truly understand the mystery of Avalon, we must journey beyond the documented historical record and into the mists of its origins. The name itself whispers its secrets. The word Avalon stems from the Old Welsh term Wynwes Afalac, which translates to Isle of Apples. For the ancient Celtic cultures, apples were a powerful symbol. They represented wisdom, immortality, and profound healing. They were the fruit of the afterlife, the bounty of a blessed realm. This concept is a recurring theme in Celtic mythology, where a paradise known as Tir na Nog, the land of eternal youth, was often depicted as an island accessible only through a mystical sea voyage. Its inhabitants never aged and its soil was eternally fertile. Avalon, the Isle of Apples, is a direct fusion of these primordial beliefs with the nascent Arthurian myth. It is the promise of life after life, a sacred place of infinite healing where pain and death hold no sway. The first chronicler to unite the legend of King Arthur with the island of Avalon was the Welsh cleric Geoffrey of Monmouth, in his seminal 12th-century work, Historia Regum Britanniae. In a world starved for legendary heroes, Geoffrey introduced Arthur as a glorious monarch, and in the tragic climax of his reign following the fatal Battle of Camlan, Geoffrey describes the king's final fate. The noble King Arthur, mortally wounded, was carried to the Isle of Avalon for his wounds to be healed, and he handed the crown of Britain over to his kinsman Constantine. This was the very first time Avalon was not only mentioned but positioned as the king's final destination, the place of his retreat and recuperation. Geoffrey further elaborates on the island in his later work, Vita Merlini, describing it as an island to which noble sailors journeyed and which had no need of plows for sowing, and its fields were of fruits that grew without cultivation. He describes a realm of eternal spring, where the bounty of nature is given freely, and the inhabitants live in perfect harmony. Geoffrey of Monmouth was also the one who first gave us a glimpse of the island's inhabitants. He described Avalon as being ruled by the powerful sorceress Morgana and her 9 sisters. In Geoffrey's work, Morgana was not a figure of malice but rather an enchanted healer of immense skill, capable of shape-shifting and taking flight. She was a high priestess, a mistress of ancient magic. This early portrayal suggests that Avalon was a place of powerful feminine energy, a mystical matriarchy that existed outside the patriarchal laws of the mortal world. It was a realm governed by women who wielded the primal forces of nature, a stark contrast to the new male-dominated world of Christian chivalry that was rising in Britain. In this sense, the legend of Avalon is an echo of an earlier age, a fading memory of a religion and a way of life that was being lost to time. The fusion of Arthur's story, a warrior king who likely lived in the chaos of the 5th or 6th centuries, with the myth of Avalon, an island that embodied the hope and magic of Celtic traditions, was a perfect combination. It gave the story an epic ending and an immortal promise. The king did not die. He simply retreated to a realm beyond our comprehension, poised to return when the land he once ruled needed him again. Avalon is not merely a destination, but a fundamental part of Arthur's identity, the place where his destiny was forged, the source of his powerful sword, and the promise of his eternity. And so, the fate of Arthur and the magic of Avalon were forever entwined, forging a bond that neither death nor history could ever break. To truly understand Avalon, we must first understand the man whose destiny became irrevocably tied to it. The heart of the entire legend, the very soul of this mythical tapestry, belongs to King Arthur. Yet, the figure we envision today, a knight in shining armor, presiding over a utopian kingdom, is a hero forged not only in history but also in hope. The man behind the legend was, in all likelihood, a fierce warrior living in an age of profound darkness. The Roman legions had withdrawn from Britain, leaving the island to fracture into small, warring kingdoms. A wave of invaders, Saxons, Angles, and Jutes, poured onto the shores, pushing the native Britons to the brink of extinction. This was not the world of chivalry and courtly romance. It was a land of mud, blood, and desperate survival. In this chaos, a leader arose. A commander, perhaps of Romano-British lineage, who rallied the fragmented kingdoms and for a brief, glorious period, held the invaders at bay. This historical figure, whose real name is lost to time, became the genesis of the myth. As generations passed and the oral traditions were polished, the warlord became a king. The scattered victories became a single, shining reign. The dream of a united Britain gave birth to the dream of Camelot, an ideal kingdom where order and justice were the law. The rough-hewn fortress became a magnificent castle, and the desperate, bloody battles were transformed into noble quests for glory and honor. The very beginning of Arthur's rise to power is a testament to the magic of Avalon. The famous story of the sword in the stone is not simply about strength, but about divine right and a preordained destiny. It signifies that Arthur's rule was not won by mere conquest, but was granted by a higher power, a power linked to the ancient, mystical traditions of the land itself. His reign was the culmination of a prophecy, a fulfillment of a promise made by the land to its people. This is the first echo of Avalon in his life, long before his final journey to its shores. The creation of the Round Table is perhaps the most enduring symbol of Arthur's kingship. In a world defined by hierarchies and rank, the Round Table was a revolutionary concept. It was a circle of equals, where no knight sat at a more prominent position than another. It was a physical manifestation of an ideal, that true power lay not in dominance but in collaboration, not in rank but in honor. This brotherhood of knights, bound by an unwavering code of chivalry, became the moral compass of the kingdom. They were the champions of the oppressed, the keepers of the peace, and the purveyors of justice. Their very existence was proof that the ideal of Camelot was not a mere fantasy but a tangible, living reality. But the story of a hero is never just about his ascent. It is about his struggles, his triumphs, and his inevitable fall. Arthur was a king, but he was also a man. He was burdened by the weight of a destiny he did not choose, a fragile ideal that he had to uphold against all odds. His life was a constant struggle to balance the ancient power of the land with the new ideals of Christianity, to hold his kingdom together while the seeds of its destruction were being sown by those closest to him. His existence was a fragile golden age, a fleeting moment of perfection that was destined to end. Arthur's connection to Avalon, therefore, is not a coincidence but a narrative inevitability. The island is not just his final destination, it is the source of his power and the ultimate sanctuary for his weary soul. The magic that gave him his sword and his kingdom is the same magic that claims him at the end. His journey to Avalon is a return to his roots, a retreat to the very essence of the earth that made him a king. He is, in essence, a manifestation of the land itself, and when his time as king is over, he must return to it. The legend of the king who was and will be, is a promise that the ideal he represents, justice, honor, and courage, can never truly die. It is a belief that even in our darkest hours, a spark of that golden age still remains, waiting in the mists of Avalon for its time to return. Every great king needs a kingdom, every great kingdom needs a hero, and every great hero needs a guide. In the tapestry of Arthurian myth, that guide is the enigmatic, all-knowing figure of Merlin. But to call him merely a guide is to miss the true depth of his being. Merlin is the bridge between two worlds, the mortal realm of men with its fleeting triumphs and inevitable betrayals, and the ancient, eternal world of magic, embodied by Avalon. His story is not just a prologue to Arthur's, it is the tragic tale of a guardian caught between two colliding forces. Legends say that Merlin's origins are as mystical as his powers. He is often said to be the son of an incubus demon and a mortal woman, born with the knowledge of a demon and the soul of a man. Other, older Welsh myths refer to him as Myrddin Wlt, a wild bard driven to madness by the horrors of war, who retreated to the woods and gained the gift of prophecy. In all accounts, his power is immense and a part of him, an innate force that connects him to the very earth and stars. Merlin is not a wizard who merely casts spells. He is a force of nature, a seer who sees the threads of fate weaving through time. He sees the rise of Camelot, not as a glorious end, but as a fragile, fleeting moment. He understands that Arthur's kingdom, for all its splendor, is built on a foundation of human ambition, which is inherently flawed. He recognizes the coming of a new age, an age of reason and monotheism, that will inevitably eclipse the old ways of magic and pagan worship. He knows that the very world that gives him his power is slowly but surely fading into legend. This is the central tragic conflict of Merlin's life. He is a protector of a world that is destined to disappear. This brings us to the most profound of Merlin's actions, the veiling of Avalon. As Camelot rises, a counterforce is set in motion. To protect Avalon, the very heart of magic, from the encroaching corruption of the mortal world, Merlin uses his immense power to shroud the island in a permanent, impenetrable mist. It's a magical barrier, a spiritual seal. He doesn't just make it physically hard to find, he makes it spiritually inaccessible to those who lack a pure heart and a strong connection to the old ways. It is an act of ultimate preservation, a final act of devotion to the sacred land. But it is also an act of isolation. By severing Avalon from the world, he leaves Camelot, the kingdom he helped create, without its most powerful source of magic. This act of veiling is a double-edged sword. It saves Avalon, but it dooms Camelot. The withdrawal of magic from the world is the beginning of the end for Arthur's kingdom. The spiritual light of Avalon is dimmed for mankind, leaving a void that is filled not by faith and goodness, but by ambition, betrayal, and war. Merlin's magic becomes a memory, a story told in whispers. His power, once a tangible force, is now something to be feared or doubted. His final, tragic fate, to be imprisoned in a crystal cave or a tree by his own apprentice, Nimue or Vivian, is not a random act of villainy, but the culmination of this slow decline. The new generation of magic, born of the fading light, is already a pale imitation of the old. It lacks Merlin's connection to the earth, his raw, unbridled power. Ultimately, Merlin's story is a profound meditation on the nature of progress and loss. He is a testament to the idea that to gain one thing, you must often lose another. Camelot, with its chivalry and order, could not coexist with the wild, untamed magic of Avalon. In veiling the magical realm, Merlin ensured its survival, but also sealed his own tragic fate and the downfall of the very kingdom he worked so hard to build. His final disappearance from the mortal world is not just a moment in a story, it is the symbolic end of an age, a final, sorrowful farewell to the magic that once defined the world. In the dense, complex tapestry of Arthurian legend, few figures are as enigmatic, as deeply symbolic, or as fundamentally crucial as the Ladies of the Lake. They are not merely characters in a story, they are archetypes of ancient, elemental power. They are the guardians of a magic far older than Camelot itself, a magic tied to the very essence of the earth and, most importantly, to water. In Celtic mythology, bodies of water, lakes, rivers, and wells, were considered portals, gateways to the otherworld and the realm of the Fae and the gods. The Ladies of the Lake are the keepers of these gates. The title Lady of the Lake is not a singular name, but rather a mantle worn by multiple powerful women throughout the legends. The most prominent among them is Vivian, the one who is said to have gifted Excalibur to a young King Arthur. Her very presence, rising from the shimmering surface of the lake, is a visual declaration of her origin and power. She is a priestess, a sorceress, and a warrior in her own right, embodying the dual nature of magic, a force that can bring forth life and bestow immense power. Her act of granting Arthur the sword is not a simple gift, it is a profound contract. By accepting Excalibur, Arthur commits to a reciprocal relationship with the world of magic. The sword, forged in Avalon, is a symbol of his authority, but it is also a reminder that his power is not his own. It is borrowed from a realm that exists beyond his kingdom. Then there is Nimue, a figure who often overlaps with Vivian. Nimue is frequently portrayed as the one who captivates and, ultimately, imprisons Merlin. Her story is a cautionary tale about the clash between the old and the new. She is Merlin's apprentice, but she represents a new, more guarded kind of magic. While Merlin's power is wild and instinctual, Nimue's is more disciplined and manipulative. By sealing Merlin away in a crystal cave or an enchanted tree, she doesn't just commit a treacherous act, she performs a symbolic one. She protects the world from a magic too great to be contained, and she protects Merlin from the sorrow of a world that is leaving magic behind. Her actions, while often seen as malevolent, are a necessary step in the transition from an age of raw magic to an age of human reason and control. The Ladies of the Lake, in all their forms, represent a matriarchal system of power that is in direct opposition to the rising patriarchal society of Arthur's court. Camelot is a kingdom of men, built on the foundations of chivalry, law, and eventually Christian faith. The Ladies of the Lake are the last vestiges of the old ways, the old gods, the old magic, and a world where nature and the feminine spirit held ultimate authority. Their existence is a constant reminder that for all of Arthur's power, there are forces in the world that are beyond his understanding and control. Their power does not come from royal decree or a knight's pledge, It comes from the earth itself, from the deep waters that hold ancient secrets. Their role in the legend is bookended by two of the most pivotal moments in Arthur's life. First, they give him Excalibur, the source of his temporal power. Then, at the very end, after the collapse of his kingdom and his mortal wounding, they return. On the final boat that takes him to Avalon, legends say that it is these same ladies of the lake who guide the vessel. Their presence on that final journey brings their story full circle. The very hands that gave him the means to rule are the same hands that now carry him to the land of healing and immortality. It is a powerful, symbolic moment, signifying that for all his human-made glory, Arthur's fate was always, and will always be, in the hands of the ancient magic he was born to protect. The ladies of the lake are a living testament to the enduring power of myth. They remind us that there are forces in the world that cannot be conquered by a sword or ruled by a king. They are the silent, eternal guardians of a realm that whispers just beyond the mist, a realm that awaits its hero. In the vast and shimmering mosaic of the Arthurian myth, few objects hold as much weight, as much symbolic power, or as much enduring mystery as the legendary blade Excalibur. Yet, this iconic weapon is often confused with another sword, one that is perhaps even more famous in its own right, the sword in the stone. To understand Excalibur is to first understand the critical difference between the two. The sword in the stone, often named Caliban, was a symbol of destiny. It was a test of worthiness, a physical proof of Arthur's lineage and his divinely appointed right to rule. It demonstrated that his kingship was not won by force of arms or by bloodline alone, but by a preordained fate. However, once Arthur had claimed his throne and established his court, Caliban was destined to break in battle, a testament to its mortal origins. It is at this pivotal moment that the true sword of prophecy enters the story. When Arthur's first blade shatters, Merlin guides him to a serene, misty lake. From its surface, a hand, pure and elegant, rises from the water, holding aloft a magnificent sword. This is Excalibur, and the hand belongs to the Lady of the Lake. Her act of giving the sword is not a simple transaction. It is a sacred covenant. Excalibur is a gift from Avalon itself, a tangible link between the mortal kingdom of Camelot and the immortal, magical realm that exists just beyond the veil of mist. By receiving this blade, Arthur accepts not only an unparalleled weapon but also the responsibility that comes with wielding a power that is not of this world. The magic of Excalibur is twofold, residing in both the blade and its scabbard. The blade itself is said to be unbreakable, its light so brilliant that it could blind Arthur's enemies in battle. But the real source of its power lay in the scabbard. The scabbard had the incredible ability to prevent its wearer from bleeding, making Arthur virtually invincible. It was a physical manifestation of Avalon's protection, a sign that the king, so long as he remained connected to his destiny and to the magic of the land, could not be defeated by mortal means. This detail is crucial to understanding the tragedy that follows. When Morgana, driven by her deep resentment, steals the scabbard, she strips Arthur of his divine protection. She makes him mortal again, vulnerable to the very betrayal and bloodshed that will ultimately lead to the downfall of his kingdom. Excalibur is more than a weapon. It is the very heart of the Arthurian legend. It is a symbol of power's source, its responsibilities and its ultimate end. Its existence binds Arthur's story to a cosmic cycle of birth and return. The sword and its scabbard represent the fleeting golden age of Camelot, a time when mortal chivalry and ancient magic coexisted in perfect harmony. But, as with all things, that harmony could not last. The loss of the scabbard is the moment when the balance begins to shift, when the light of Avalon starts to recede from the human world. It is the beginning of the end, foreshadowing the final, tragic battle that awaits the king. In the final moments of Arthur's life, as he lies mortally wounded on the battlefield of Camlan, he gives his last command to his most loyal knight, Sir Bedivere. He must return Excalibur to the lake from whence it came. The scene is one of profound pathos. Bedivere, consumed by grief and a human desire for a relic of such splendor, hesitates. Twice he hides the sword, unable to bear the thought of casting away an object of such beauty and power. But a dying king's will is absolute, and on the third attempt, Bedivere throws the sword. In a moment of breathtaking magic, a hand rises from the water, catches the blade and draws it back into the depths, returning the power of Avalon to its source. The cycle is complete. The sword returns to the lake and the king returns to the island. It is an act of ultimate surrender, a final acknowledgement that his power was never truly his own, but a sacred trust to be returned to the earth when his time was done. A king is nothing without a kingdom, and a kingdom is nothing without its champions. After he had proven his lineage and claimed his throne, King Arthur established a society founded not on blood or conquest, but on a shared ideal. He created Camelot, a city that would become a beacon of hope and a symbol of justice in a world still haunted by the shadows of war. But the true heart of this new kingdom was not its castle or its crown, it was the Round Table. More than just a piece of furniture, it was a revolutionary concept in an age defined by strict hierarchy. Here, no knight was greater than another. All were equals, bound by a sacred oath of service and fellowship. The Knights of the Round Table were the living embodiment of the code of chivalry, a strict set of rules that demanded honor, courage, and mercy. Their vows were simple yet profound: to protect the innocent, to fight against injustice, to uphold the Christian faith, and to always show compassion. They were a brotherhood forged not in blood, but in a shared belief in a world that could be made better. Their quests were not just for personal glory but for the betterment of the kingdom. They sought to right wrongs, to defeat monstrous beasts, and to bring order to the chaos that still simmered on the edges of Arthur's realm. Among them were men whose names would become legend, each a reflection of the Brotherhood's strengths and, ultimately, its fatal flaws. There was Sir Lancelot, the perfect knight. He was unequaled in combat, a paragon of courage and skill, and his very name was synonymous with chivalry. Yet, his profound love for Queen Guinevere was a secret wound, a forbidden passion that would, in time, corrupt his loyalty and bring ruin to the court. Then there was Sir Gawain, Arthur's nephew, a knight known for his unwavering loyalty and courtly manners. He was the most steadfast of the knights, a rock in the storm, but his fiery temper and fierce pride were a weakness that could be exploited. Finally, there was Sir Galahad, the spiritual heir to the Brotherhood. He was a knight of unparalleled purity, destined to succeed where others would fail. His very existence was a constant reminder of the spiritual path the knights had forgotten. The ultimate test for the Brotherhood was not a battle against an enemy army, but the spiritual quest for the Holy Grail. It was a journey that took the knights out of the realm of earthly combat and into a search for divine grace. It was meant to elevate the spirit of the knights and to provide them with a renewed sense of purpose. But the quest was a double-edged sword. While it elevated the pure-hearted like Galahad, it exposed the moral frailties of the others. The quest for the Holy Grail fragmented the Brotherhood, sending its members on solitary journeys, often leading them away from the very ideals they had sworn to protect. The bonds that held the Round Table together, though strong, were not unbreakable. The seeds of its destruction were sown from within. The jealousy and rivalry that festered in the wake of Lancelot's affair with Guinevere created an unbridgeable rift. The ideal of equality gave way to human pettiness and betrayal. In the end, the Brotherhood turned on itself. The knights, once a unified force, became an army of splintered loyalties. Their perfect fellowship, once so strong, was torn apart by the very passions it was meant to transcend. The fall of the Round Table is inextricably linked to the receding magic of Avalon. With the world moving away from the old ways, the knights lost their spiritual compass. The light of a golden age that was guided by magic began to fade, and what was left was simply human frailty. The story of the Round Table is, in the end, a timeless cautionary tale. It is a reminder that even the noblest of human endeavors, born of the purest intentions, can be undone by the darkness that resides in the human heart. The legend of King Arthur began as a chronicle of earthly power, forged in battle and sealed with a sword from a magical lake. But as Camelot reached its golden age, the saga underwent a profound transformation. The knights, having achieved every physical victory, found themselves in a spiritual void. It was into this void that a new and all-encompassing quest was born, the search for the Holy Grail. Its arrival in the narrative elevates the entire myth from a simple tale of kings and knights into a profound spiritual pilgrimage. The Grail is not just a mythical object, it is the physical embodiment of divine grace, a relic with a rich and complex history. It is believed to be the cup used by Jesus Christ at the Last Supper and later used by Joseph of Arimathea to collect Christ's blood at the crucifixion. Its appearance in Camelot was a call to a higher purpose, a challenge that went beyond earthly glory. The quest for the Grail was a complete departure from the traditional adventures of the Round Table. It was not a quest to vanquish a physical foe, defeat a dragon, or rescue a captive maiden. It was an internal journey, a moral and spiritual trial. The true enemies were not external monsters, but the sins and imperfections that lay within each knight's heart. Only a knight of absolute purity could hope to succeed. This radical shift in focus exposed the moral frailties of even the most celebrated heroes of Camelot. At the heart of this quest was Sir Galahad, the perfect knight. From the moment he arrived at court, it was clear he was different. He was destined for greatness, and his spiritual purity set him apart from the other knights. His seat at the Round Table, the Siege Perilous, was one that had remained empty until his arrival, as it was said to be fatal to any knight who was not pure enough to sit in it. Galahad was a beacon of hope, a living testament to the possibility of achieving a state of grace. He was not motivated by earthly fame, glory, or honor, but by an unwavering devotion to God. His unwavering faith, his chastity, and his complete selflessness were the only tools he needed for his journey. He faced temptations not with a sword, but with prayer, and he conquered his inner demons not with strength but with faith. The contrast between Galahad's success and the failures of the other great knights is where the true power of the story lies. Sir Lancelot, the greatest knight in all the world, a man of unparalleled courage and skill, failed his quest. His deep, forbidden love for Queen Guinevere was his fatal flaw. His sin, his human weakness, made him unworthy of the divine grace he sought. He was granted a brief, tantalizing glimpse of the Grail, but he could not hold it or keep it, for his heart was not pure. Likewise, Sir Gawain, a noble and loyal knight, failed his quest because his fiery temper and worldly pride stood in his way. Their failures were not a sign of weakness, they were a testament to the sheer magnitude of the task. They were human, all too human, and the Grail demanded something more. The quest for the Grail was a cataclysm for the Round Table. It drew the best knights away from Camelot, leaving the kingdom vulnerable to its enemies. The once unified brotherhood was now scattered across the land, each on a solitary journey. The single-minded pursuit of the divine fractured their fellowship, and the knights became isolated and lost. The Grail, which was meant to bring them closer to God, ultimately led to the undoing of their earthly kingdom. It was a search for perfection that, in its pursuit, revealed the inherent imperfections of the human world. In the end, Galahad alone achieved the quest. He found the Grail, and in a moment of sublime ecstasy, he was granted his wish to be taken to heaven. The Grail, along with its most worthy knight, was taken from the mortal world forever. This event is a spiritual parallel to the physical departure of Arthur to Avalon. Just as the magic of Avalon was sealed away from the human world, so too was the divine grace of the Grail. Its departure signifies the final withdrawal of divine and magical forces, leaving the kingdom of Camelot to face its own downfall. The search for the Holy Grail is a powerful and timeless allegory. It represents humanity's eternal yearning for spiritual connection, salvation, and a return to a purer state of being. It reminds us that while we can build great kingdoms and achieve great feats, our true purpose lies not in earthly conquest, but in a quiet, personal journey toward a higher truth. In the vast and legendary court of Camelot, every hero had a clear purpose, every knight a defined role. Yet, just outside the circle of light, stood a figure of immeasurable power and profound ambiguity, Morgana. She is, in many ways, the true heart of the Arthurian tragedy. She is not a simple villain, but a complex, multifaceted character who embodies the ultimate conflict of the age. She is King Arthur's sister, a powerful sorceress, a high priestess of Avalon, and the key that unlocks the kingdom's eventual destruction. Her story is the shadow cast by Camelot's light, a constant reminder that for all of its chivalry and order, there was a wild, untamed magic that could not be controlled. Morgana's journey begins as a child of prophecy, trained in the arts of magic by Merlin himself. She is a true daughter of Avalon, steeped in the ancient pagan traditions of the old world. While Arthur is raised to be a king of men, guided by a singular, Christian God and a code of human law, Morgana is taught to commune with the forces of nature and to draw her power from the earth itself. The tragedy of her life is her love for a brother who, in her eyes, chose to abandon their shared magical heritage for a kingdom of mortals. She witnesses Arthur's embrace of a new faith and his rejection of the old ways of Avalon, a choice that she sees as a profound betrayal of their sacred bond. Her rage is not a simple villain's malice. It is the fury of a priestess watching her world crumble. The source of her resentment is deeply personal. As the sister of the king and a powerful sorceress, Morgana should have been a key figure in the new kingdom. Yet, in many tales she is cast aside, her powers are feared, and her wisdom is ignored. Her conflict with Guinevere is not just a lover's jealousy, it is a clash between two competing visions of womanhood. Guinevere represents the Christian ideal of a queen, pure, loyal, and devoted to her husband and God. Morgana, on the other hand, represents the wild, untamed feminine power of the pagan world, a power that is both feared and misunderstood by the men of Camelot. Her schemes, her dark magic, and her attempts to undermine Arthur's rule are not driven by a singular desire for power. They are a desperate and often misguided attempt to force her brother to recognize the power of the old ways. Her greatest act of betrayal, the one that seals the kingdom's fate, is her role in the creation of Mordred. In many versions of the legend, she deliberately conceives a child with Arthur through deception. This act is a twisted form of revenge, a way to create a figure who, by blood and prophecy, is destined to bring about the downfall of the man who spurned her. Mordred is the living embodiment of Morgana's rage and a constant reminder to Arthur that the sins of the father will be visited upon the son. He is the Shadow King, born of a place of darkness to end a kingdom of light. Through him, Morgana seeks to prove that Arthur's perfect kingdom, for all its glory, has a fatal flaw rooted in its very foundation. And yet, in the very end, Morgana's story comes full circle in an act of profound mercy. After the final, cataclysmic battle, when Arthur lies mortally wounded, she is not triumphant. Instead, she is one of the three queens who appear on the magical boat to take him to Avalon. Despite her years of hatred, her ancient role as a priestess and healer takes precedence. She is the one who tends to her brother's wounds, and it is her magic that carries him to the sacred land of healing and immortality. This final act of compassion is a testament to her complex nature. She is the darkness, but she is also the light, the betrayer, but also the healer. She is the perfect paradox, the living embodiment of Avalon itself. Morgana's legacy endures as a powerful symbol of the untamed feminine, a reminder that the stories we tell often demonize what we do not understand. She represents a truth that could not be contained by the simple narrative of good versus evil. The magic she practiced and the world she fought for were not evil, they were simply different. And in the end, it was her love for that world and her reluctant love for her brother that brought the king home to Avalon. Of all the places in the world steeped in myth and folklore, few hold a deeper or more tangible connection to the legends of King Arthur and Avalon than the small, mystical town of Glastonbury in Somerset, England. While every other location in the Arthurian saga might exist only in the realm of stories, Glastonbury presents itself as a living, breathing testament to the myth. Its landscape, its history, and its very atmosphere seem to whisper of a time when the veil between worlds was thin. But what is it about this specific place that has made it the heart of the Avalon legend for centuries? Is it a true historical link, or is it a testament to the enduring human need to find a physical anchor for a spiritual myth? The landscape itself provides the first, most compelling clue. The Glastonbury Tor, a conical hill topped by the ruins of a medieval tower, rises dramatically from what was once a vast, ancient marshland. For much of its history, the area was surrounded by water, turning the Tor into a virtual island. This powerful visual of an island rising from the mist perfectly mirrors the ethereal descriptions of Avalon. It's no great leap of faith to imagine ancient Britons navigating their boats through the mist to this verdant island, believing they were journeying to a sacred, otherworldly place. This natural geography laid the foundation for the belief that if Avalon were to exist on Earth, it would be here. The town's connection to the myth was solidified in the 12th century, thanks to the monks of Glastonbury Abbey. In 1191, after a devastating fire destroyed a large portion of the abbey, the monks made a startling claim. They had discovered the tomb of King Arthur and Queen Guinevere. They presented a massive oak coffin, buried deep beneath the ground, containing the skeletal remains of a man of great size and a woman with strands of golden hair still intact. An inscribed lead cross was also found, bearing the Latin phrase, Hic jacet sepultus inclitus rex Arturius in insula Avalonia. Here lies buried the famous King Arthur in the Isle of Avalon. This discovery, conveniently timed to attract wealthy pilgrims and a new source of income for the rebuilding of the abbey, cemented Glastonbury's place in the legend forever. While most modern historians and archaeologists view this as a strategic and highly successful medieval PR stunt, its impact on the popular imagination was undeniable. It made a distant myth feel real, transforming a story into a physical destination. Glastonbury's claim to fame doesn't end with Arthur. The town is also a nexus of other powerful pre-Christian legends that have converged and fused over the centuries. At the foot of the Tor lies the Chalice Well, a natural spring whose water is a deep, reddish-orange due to its high iron content. Local legend claims that this is the very spot where Joseph of Arimathea, the biblical figure, brought the Holy Grail to Britain after the crucifixion and buried it, causing the spring's water to run red with the blood of Christ. This story ingeniously links the pagan traditions of the sacred spring to the Christian mythology of the Holy Grail, creating a unique spiritual hybrid. It allowed the Christian pilgrims who were skeptical of Arthurian tales to find a reason to visit, while also providing a sense of deeper history for those who were drawn to the pagan roots of the land. In the modern era, Glastonbury has evolved into a vibrant center for New Age spirituality, paganism, and mysticism. It attracts thousands of visitors each year, from serious scholars of Arthurian lore to spiritual seekers looking for a deeper connection to the Earth's energy. The town is a beautiful, chaotic mix of ancient sacred sites and modern crystal shops, psychic readings, and herbal apothecaries. It's a place where the lines between the physical and the spiritual are deliberately blurred. The people who come here don't need archaeological proof to believe. They come to feel the ancient magic, to walk the same paths as the legendary figures, and to experience the echoes of Avalon with their own senses. Ultimately, Glastonbury's power lies not in its ability to prove a myth, but in its ability to nurture one. It is a place that allows the legend to breathe, to live on in the hearts of those who visit. It is the earthly Avalon not because it is the actual Isle of Apples, but because it is a place where we are permitted to believe in the impossible. It's a testament to the enduring power of stories, and our eternal desire to find a tangible paradise in an imperfect world. Every golden age, no matter how glorious, has its twilight. For King Arthur's kingdom, for the shining city of Camelot, that twilight came not with a roar of a foreign invasion, but with a whisper of betrayal from within. At its zenith, Camelot was a beacon of hope and a symbol of an ideal made real. It was a place where justice was served by the strong, where the innocent were protected, and where a chivalrous code governed the lives of all. The Round Table, the fellowship of its knights, and the unwavering resolve of its king made it seem invincible, a utopia built to last forever. But the perfect kingdom was, in the end, only as strong as its people, and people are inherently flawed. The seeds of its destruction were sown in the very soil that gave it life, watered by the passions and jealousies of its noblest inhabitants. The primary and most devastating crack in the foundation of Camelot was the forbidden love between Sir Lancelot and Queen Guinevere. This was not a simple affair, but a tragic, deeply emotional entanglement that compromised the two most important figures in Arthur's life. Lancelot, the greatest knight in all the world, was torn between his loyalty to his king and his devotion to the queen. Guinevere, a woman caught between her duties as a monarch and the desires of her heart, was forever trapped in a triangle of her own making. This secret sin, this private rebellion, became a festering wound in the very heart of the kingdom. It eroded the trust between king and queen, and it divided the loyalties of the knights who loved and respected both Arthur and Lancelot. The lie, like a poison, spread throughout the court, turning whispers into accusations and friendship into suspicion. The quest for the Holy Grail, while spiritually elevating for a select few, further exacerbated the divisions. It sent the knights on solitary quests, splintering the once unified brotherhood and leaving them isolated. The ideals of the Round Table began to fray as rivalries and resentments, once kept in check by Arthur's authority, now festered in the absence of a shared purpose. The knights who failed to find the Grail felt a deep sense of shame and unworthiness, leading to an atmosphere of melancholy and internal strife. The perfect fellowship had been broken, its members consumed not by a shared mission, but by their own personal failings. The spiritual quest that was meant to sanctify the kingdom instead revealed its inherent imperfections. And into this vacuum of trust and unity, the final architect of Camelot's ruin emerged, Mordred. As a figure of pure, cunning malice, Mordred was not a simple villain. He was a master manipulator, a personification of the kingdom's moral decay. He exploited every weakness, fanning the flames of resentment, and using the affair between Lancelot and Guinevere to undermine Arthur's authority. He gathered the disgruntled and disloyal knights, those who felt slighted or betrayed by Arthur, and built an army from the very fragments of the shattered Round Table. His actions were not just an attempt to seize power, they were a deliberate, calculated strike against the very ideals that Arthur had worked so hard to build. By exposing the king's personal failures and the hypocrisy of his court, Mordred proved that the perfect kingdom was, in the end, just as flawed as any other. The climax of this tragedy was the civil war that erupted between Arthur's forces and Mordred's rebellion. The once unified kingdom, the great beacon of light in the darkness, was now tearing itself apart. Brother fought brother and friend fought friend. The chaos and bloodshed that Arthur had sought to banish from his realm had returned with a vengeance, this time from within. The perfect kingdom crumbled, not from the might of a foreign foe, but from the weight of its own moral failings. The knights who once fought side by side for justice were now locked in a final, brutal conflict, each side believing in their own right to rule. The fall of Camelot is a timeless and universal story. It is a powerful allegory for the fragility of human ideals. It serves as a reminder that even the most noble of endeavors, built on the strongest of foundations, can be undone by the simple, enduring flaws of human nature. The magic of Avalon had receded, Merlin was gone, and the kingdom was left to its own devices. Without the guiding hand of a higher, magical purpose, Camelot could no longer sustain its impossible dream. Its fall was not just a historical event, it was the final tragic act of a world losing its soul. The end of a golden age rarely comes with a grand, final celebration. More often it comes in a final, brutal gasp. For King Arthur and his kingdom, that end arrived on a desolate, storm-swept plain known as Camlan. This was no glorious war against a foreign invader. This was a civil war, a final, heartbreaking confrontation between a king and the betrayal that had festered within his own family. The very soil of Britain, which Arthur had fought so hard to unify, was about to be drenched in the blood of its own heroes. The battle was a tragic inevitability, the final act of a prophecy set in motion long before. The atmosphere on the battlefield was not one of valor and honor, but of despair and sorrow. On one side stood the remnants of Arthur's once great army, a loyal but weary force. On the other stood the army of Mordred, a host of disgruntled knights and mercenaries, fueled by rebellion and resentment. The air was thick with a profound sense of loss, as if both sides already knew the outcome. This was not a clash of good versus evil, but a devastating collision of broken loyalties and fractured dreams. The fate of Camelot was no longer a matter of swords and shields, but of broken promises and unhealed wounds. The climax of the battle was the central, devastating duel between King Arthur and Mordred. In the chaos of the battlefield, their eyes met across the field of death. For Arthur, this was not just a fight to reclaim his throne, it was a desperate attempt to save the ideal that had defined his life. For Mordred, it was a moment of bitter triumph, a chance to finally destroy the king he hated and seize the power he craved. Their duel was a whirlwind of rage and heartbreak. The sound of their blades clashing was the final, mournful toll for the Golden Age. With a final, desperate cry, Arthur drove his spear into Mordred. The prophecy was fulfilled and Mordred fell, dead. But with his last, defiant breath, Mordred plunged his sword deeper into his king, delivering a mortal wound that no magic, no medicine could ever heal. The fall of their leaders signaled the final collapse. With their king mortally wounded, Arthur's loyal forces were decimated. The battlefield became a graveyard for the once great heroes of the Round Table. The men who had fought alongside each other, shared quests, and sworn oaths of loyalty were now just names on a list of the fallen. The dream of Camelot, built on an impossible ideal, lay in ruins on the muddy field. All that was left was the cold wind, the sound of the dying, and a single, grieving survivor. That survivor was Sir Bedivere, the last of Arthur's loyal knights. He found his king bleeding and broken, lying near a tranquil lake. With his last breaths, Arthur gave Bedivere his final command. He must return Excalibur to the lake from which it came. This act was more than a simple request. It was an act of surrender, a final acknowledgement that his power was not his own. It belonged to the magic of the land, to Avalon. Bedivere, consumed by grief and a human desire to possess such a sacred relic, hesitated. He hid the sword twice, unable to part with it, clinging to the last piece of Camelot's lost glory. But Arthur's will was absolute. On the third attempt, Bedivere, with a heavy heart, threw the sword. In a moment of breathtaking magic, a hand rose from the water, caught the hilt, and pulled it back into the depths. The cycle of power was complete. This final, tragic battle is not just a tale of a king's end. It is a powerful allegory for the end of an era. The Battle of Camlan represents the final triumph of human betrayal and sorrow over the golden age of magic and chivalry. The perfect kingdom crumbled, not from the might of a foreign foe, but from the weight of its own moral failings. The last, silent journey of Arthur, carried away by the mystical boat, signifies that his legacy was not meant to be found on a battlefield, but in the realm of myth, in the ever-present mists of Avalon. The battlefield of Camlan had fallen silent. The wind that had carried the war cries and the clang of steel now simply moaned over the bodies of the fallen. The once great King Arthur lay bleeding on the shore of the quiet lake, his life ebbing away with every passing moment. The final act of human conflict had been played out, and what remained was a landscape of desolation and a profound aching sense of finality. The sun, a blood-red disk sinking below the horizon, cast long funereal shadows over the carnage. The age of Camelot, born of a golden promise, was ending not with a fiery cataclysm, but with a quiet, solemn exhale of sorrow. All that was left to do was to make the journey from the mortal world to the realm of myth. And from the mist it came. A small boat, its hull carved from a material unknown to men, its sail a simple shimmering cloth that moved without wind. There was no sound of a paddle or the creak of wood. It simply glided as if on its own accord. Aboard the vessel were 3 figures, majestic and shrouded in mystery. 3 queens, each a symbol of the world from which Arthur had come and the world he was now destined for. They were the last to touch the mortal remains of the king, the final guides on his pilgrimage. The tales name them as Morgana, his estranged sister, the queen of the Isle of Man, a figure of ancient, otherworldly wisdom, and the queen of the wasteland who represents the promise of life and fertility even in the face of death. This was a final, sacred gathering, a reunion of a king with the forces of magic he had left behind. The queens lifted Arthur's body with a gentleness that defied their power and placed him on a bed of rushes and moss. Morgana, the betrayer, the one whose hatred had fueled the civil war, now knelt by his side, her face a mask of profound sorrow. In a final act of grace that transcends all of her past malice, she became the healer. She ministered to her brother's wounds, pouring healing waters over them and binding them with magical herbs. This act of redemption is a central, poignant part of the legend. It suggests that even the deepest betrayals can be healed, and that the bond of family and the call of a sacred purpose are stronger than any mortal hatred. The boat then silently pushed off from the shore, its journey a wordless act of passage from one reality to another. As the boat moved, the mist grew thicker, a tangible, living barrier between the world of pain and the world of peace. The sounds of the battlefield faded, replaced by the gentle lapping of water and the soft, humming incantations of the 3 queens. This was the ultimate rite of passage, a final severance from the human world. The journey was not about speed but about a change of state. It was a passage from the chaos of war to the serenity of eternity. Arthur's consciousness, no longer tethered to his dying body, was free to perceive the nature of the magic that surrounded him, a magic that was now taking him home. When the mist finally cleared, the boat had arrived. Before them lay Avalon, a realm of breathtaking beauty and perfect harmony. It was the antithesis of the battlefield from which Arthur had come. Here the air was warm and smelled of apples and honey. Orchards of magical fruit trees covered the island, their branches heavy with glowing, golden apples. The grass was a vibrant green, and the streams ran with clear, pure water. There was no disease, no decay, no sorrow. It was a place where time did not exist, where the seasons were one and the same, and where the wounds of the soul could finally be healed. The queens carried Arthur's body to a hallowed sanctuary at the center of the island, where they laid him down. And there, in the heart of Avalon, he was healed. His wounds closed, his pain vanished, and his spirit was restored. But his departure from the mortal world was permanent. His body and soul were now intertwined with the very essence of Avalon. He was not dead, he was simply in another state of being. He was the king in waiting, the legendary figure who, through his final journey, became a symbol of eternal hope. The legend of his tomb in Glastonbury Abbey bears a profound inscription: Hic jacet Arturus, rex quondam rex que futurus. Here lies Arthur, the once and future king. It is the ultimate promise that a hero's death is not an ending, but a transformation, and that the ideals he fought for will never truly die. His final journey to Avalon is a testament to the idea that true heroes simply return to the source of their power, waiting to be reborn when their ideals are needed most. The final journey to Avalon was not a funeral procession, it was a promise. Arthur's story, unlike that of most mortals, did not end with his death. It concluded with his departure to a sacred, timeless realm, from which he would one day return. This powerful idea of a hero in waiting is a timeless archetype, one that resonates across cultures and mythologies. From the German king Barbarossa sleeping in his mountain cave, his red beard growing through the stone table, to the Danish hero Holger Dansk waiting in the cellars of Kronborg Castle, humanity has long held onto the belief that its greatest champions are not truly gone. They are simply dormant, waiting for the precise moment when they are needed most. The legend of Arthur, however, is the most enduring and beloved of all these tales, a testament to its profound hold on the collective imagination. The various legends offer different locations for this final rest. Some say he sleeps with his knights under the majestic hills of Cadbury Castle in Somerset, a site often identified as the true Camelot. Others place him beneath the volcanic slopes of Mount Etna, a symbol of a hidden power waiting to erupt. In these tales, Arthur and his knights are not just resting, they are prepared. Their armor is polished, their weapons are sharp, and their horses stand ready. They are not old men, they are timeless warriors, forever in the prime of their lives, frozen in time and ready to awaken at the sound of a horn or the cry of a kingless people. The imagery is deeply potent, a kingdom's last hope, a symbol of its golden age, preserved in a sacred stasis. The very essence of this myth is captured in the famous epitaph said to be inscribed on his tomb in Glastonbury Abbey, Rex quondam rex K futurus, the once and future king. This inscription is not just a memorial, it is a prophecy. It is a spiritual and political promise to a nation that no matter how dire the circumstances, no matter how great the betrayal, the spirit of its greatest king, and the ideals he represents, will return. The myth of the sleeping king served as a form of collective security. When the nation was in peril, when it felt lost and directionless, the people could look to the hills and find comfort in the belief that their true king was merely sleeping, not dead. This belief was a source of national identity and resilience, a powerful symbol of an unbreakable spirit. This myth served a crucial psychological and political function throughout history. During the darkest days of the Second World War, as bombs fell on London and the British people faced the threat of invasion, the myth of King Arthur was invoked to rally the nation. The once and future king became a symbol of British defiance and courage. The idea that their past glory was not lost, but merely dormant, gave them the strength to fight for their future. This is the true genius of the myth. It is a story that adapts to the needs of the time. When a society feels a profound loss of purpose, a loss of its core identity, the myth of the sleeping hero offers a powerful form of therapy. It reminds us that the values we cherish are not gone, they are simply waiting for us to call upon them once more. The symbolic meaning of a hero sleeping is what makes the myth so enduring. A hero who dies is a historical figure. A hero who sleeps is an eternal ideal. He is not a man to be found on a map or in a historical document. He is an idea, a set of values, a state of being that is always available. The myth implies that the courage, honor, and justice of the past are not lost. They are merely dormant, waiting for a time of great peril to reawaken. It suggests that every age has the potential for its own Arthur, its own Camelot, its own golden age. The hero will return when the world is at its worst, signifying that the greatest darkness is always followed by the greatest light. Arthur's final journey to Avalon was not just an end, it was a new beginning. It was the moment he transcended his mortality to become a timeless ideal. His story became a powerful reminder that our greatest heroes, and the ideals they represent, do not die. They simply retreat to a place of peace, waiting for the day they are needed again. And so, the echo of his promise lives on, a silent whisper in the mists, assuring us that the king who was and will be, is always with us. Myths are born in the whispers of bards and the memory of a people, passed down from generation to generation in an endless, ephemeral chain. For centuries, the tales of King Arthur and the magical Isle of Avalon existed in this oral form, subject to a constant state of flux. But in the High Middle Ages, a new technology, the written word, gave these myths permanence. This was a transformative era, where the wild, untamed stories of an ancient past were captured, codified, and refined by scribes and chroniclers. In doing so, they not only preserved the legend of Avalon, but they fundamentally reshaped it, imbuing it with new meanings that reflected the triumphs and anxieties of their own time. The foundational text for the Arthurian legend, and for our understanding of Avalon, is undoubtedly Geoffrey of Monmouth's Historia Regum Britanniae. Written in the 12th century, this work presented Arthur as a legitimate historical king of Britain, and it was the first to introduce the concept of Avalon as a place of healing and sanctuary. Geoffrey's Avalon was a utopian isle, a paradise of eternal spring where Morgana and her sisters, benevolent and powerful healers, resided. In his subsequent work, Vita Merlini, Geoffrey expands on this idyllic vision, describing the island as a place of incredible abundance, where nature provides all that is needed. His work established Avalon as a tangible, albeit magical, destination, a place where a king could be taken to be cured of mortal wounds. As the legend spread across Europe, it was further developed by a new generation of writers. The French poet Robert de Boron, in his early 13th century works, made a crucial innovation. He integrated the Christian myth of the Holy Grail into the Arthurian saga. This was a pivotal moment for Avalon. By linking the pagan, Celtic paradise to the Christian search for salvation, de Boron created a more complex and spiritually charged myth. The Grail became the ultimate object of desire, a Christian parallel to the eternal life and healing promised by Avalon. This fusion of a Christian holy relic with a pagan magical land turned the quest for Avalon from a simple journey into a spiritual pilgrimage, a search for both a physical paradise and a metaphysical state of grace. The legend reached a new level of sophistication with the Vulgate cycle, a series of anonymous Old French prose romances written in the early 13th century. This massive work, which introduced the iconic affair between Lancelot and Guinevere and first brought the figure of Galahad to prominence, also provided a richer, more detailed portrayal of Avalon. In this version, Avalon is a place of immense power and mystery, the home of the ladies of the lake and a source of incredible magic. It is in these romances that Morgana's character darkens, transforming from a benevolent healer into a powerful and often malevolent sorceress, her powers a source of both wonder and fear for the knights of Camelot. The Vulgate cycle gave Avalon a new weight and a more complex identity, a place of both creation and destruction, love and betrayal. But it was Sir Thomas Malory's Le Morte d'Arthur, written in the 15th century, that would become the definitive version of the legend for centuries. Malory, writing from a prison cell in England, consolidated all the previous myths, cycles and legends into a single cohesive narrative. His work, written at a time of great political turmoil in England, gave the myth a new sense of melancholy and loss. In Malory's hands, Avalon is the final, somber destination. It is the place where a dying king is taken after the final, tragic battle. Malory portrays the journey to Avalon not as a triumphant return to a paradise, but as a quiet, sorrowful departure from a world that has lost its grace. He seals the myth with the famous inscription, Hic jacet Arcturus rex quondam rex que futurus, ensuring that the promise of the king's return would forever be a part of the tale. These medieval authors were not just transcribing ancient tales, they were using the myth of Avalon to explore the tensions of their own time. They grappled with the clash between Christian and pagan beliefs, the erosion of chivalric ideals, and the search for spiritual meaning in a world of increasing chaos. Through their works, Avalon transformed from a simple Isle of Apples into a complex, multi-layered symbol. It became a pagan paradise, a healing sanctuary, a place of immense magic and ultimately, a somber resting place for a king who, in the end, transcended his mortal fate to become a timeless legend. Without the dedication of these medieval writers, the story of Avalon might have been lost to the mists of time, as elusive as the island itself. For nearly 3 centuries after the definitive works of Thomas Malory, the legend of King Arthur and Avalon lay largely dormant. The Renaissance and the Age of Enlightenment brought new intellectual pursuits, a focus on empirical science, and a preference for classical tales over medieval romances. The wild magic and chivalric ideals of Camelot seemed out of step with an era of rationalism and discovery. The myth of the sleeping king was not dead, it was simply resting, waiting for a new age to call upon its spirit. That call came in the 19th century with the rise of the Romantic and Victorian movements. These eras, disillusioned with the rigid conformity of the Industrial Revolution, looked to the past for solace, finding in the Arthurian legends a powerful source of heroic idealism, spiritual yearning, and a sense of a purer, more noble age. The revival of the myth began with the poets and artists of the Victorian era. The undisputed master of this period was Alfred, Lord Tennyson. His monumental work, Idylls of the King, a collection of narrative poems, reimagined the legend for a generation grappling with moral decay and spiritual doubt. Tennyson's Arthur is not the fiery warrior of old, but a perfect, almost Christ-like figure, a symbol of moral virtue who fights against the forces of selfishness and sin. In Tennyson's allegory, the fall of Camelot is a moral tragedy, a consequence of the kingdom's inability to live up to its own high ideals. His Avalon is not just a place of magic, but a symbol of a spiritual retreat, a peaceful afterlife that awaits the virtuous. It is a far more ethereal and idealized realm than its medieval counterpart, a direct reflection of Victorian sensibilities. Alongside the poets, the artists of the pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood brought the legend to life in breathtaking and romantic detail. Painters like Dante Gabriel Rossetti, Edward Burne-Jones, and William Morris filled their canvases with vivid, dreamlike scenes of chivalry, courtly love, and enchanted landscapes. Their art, with its rich colors and symbolic imagery, repopularized the iconic figures of Arthur, Merlin, Lancelot, and Guinevere, making the myth accessible and enchanting to a new audience. The romantic melancholy and aesthetic beauty of their works captured the spiritual and emotional essence of the legend, solidifying its place in the modern artistic consciousness. As the world entered the tumultuous 20th century, the myth of Arthur was reinterpreted once again to reflect a new set of concerns. The pure idealism of the Victorians was replaced with a more complex psychological and humanistic approach. T.H. White's series of novels, The Once and Future King, was a pivotal work in this transition. White's Arthur is not a perfect king but a flawed, relatable human being who struggles to create a better world, a king who yearns for a solution to the eternal problem of war. White injected humor and humanity into the myth, grounding its grand scope in the small, relatable details of human life. His take on Avalon is a mixture of reverence and realism, a place of profound magic that exists just beyond the mundane world. However, no single work has had a more profound impact on the modern understanding of the myth than Marion Zimmer Bradley's 1983 novel, The Mists of Avalon. Bradley's book was a complete deconstruction and recontextualization of the legend. By telling the story from the perspective of the women, Morgana, Vivian, and Guinevere, she gave a voice to the marginalized figures of the myth. Her Avalon is not a distant, misty paradise but a tangible, matriarchal and pagan world in a desperate, losing struggle with the patriarchal and Christian world of Camelot. Bradley's Morgana is not a simple villain, but a tragic heroine fighting to preserve her ancient religion and way of life. The book transformed Avalon into a sacred place of the goddess, a symbol of feminine power and spiritual rebellion that resonated deeply with a new generation of readers. In the postmodern era, the myth continues to be deconstructed and reinvented, reflecting modern anxieties about power, gender, and the environment. We see the myth in 1,000 different forms, in films that de-romanticize the legend, in television series that explore its psychological depths, and in video games that turn the quest into a personal journey. Each version reflects our own struggles and hopes, serving as a mirror for the timeless conflict between good and evil, order and chaos, and the enduring quest for a better world. The myth endures because it is infinitely adaptable, a testament to the idea that the once and future king is always with us, changing and evolving with the times. In the modern era, the grand sagas of medieval literature have found a new life and a new canvas, the screen. Film and video games provided a revolutionary way to experience the Arthurian legend, moving it from the quiet imagination of the reader to a shared, dynamic, and often visually spectacular medium. No longer confined to the pages of a book, the heroes of Camelot and the magic of Avalon could now be seen, heard, and even controlled, reaching a global audience far beyond the grasp of traditional literature. This transition was not just a change in format, it was a reinterpretation of the myth itself, molding it to fit the desires and technologies of a new age. Early cinematic adaptations often approached the myth through the lens of fantasy or family entertainment. Disney's The Sword in the Stone, 1963, stands as a prime example. This charming animated feature introduced millions of children to the legend of Arthur and Merlin, simplifying the complex themes of prophecy and destiny into a humorous, heartwarming tale of a boy's journey to self-discovery. It presented magic as a force of playful wonder, and Merlin as a lovable, eccentric figure. While it largely glossed over the darker aspects of the myth, it successfully embedded the core story in the global consciousness, making the names Arthur, Merlin, and Excalibur household words. However, the most profound and influential cinematic take on the myth came with John Boorman's Excalibur, 1981. This film was a complete departure from previous adaptations. It was a dark, surreal, and visually stunning epic that treated the myth with a profound sense of psychological and mystical weight. Boorman's film is a dense, symbolic journey, a retelling of the entire saga from the forging of the kingdom to its fall. It emphasizes the pagan roots of the story, portraying a world where magic is a raw, brutal, and sexual force. Avalon is not a distant paradise in this version. It is the very essence of the land, a living presence that is both beautiful and terrifying. The film's use of hypnotic music, Wagner and Orff, striking visual compositions, and a cyclical narrative of life, death, and rebirth made it a landmark in fantasy cinema, proving that the myth could be told with seriousness and artistic grandeur. Following Excalibur, the myth continued to be reinterpreted in a variety of styles. Films like Jerry Zucker's First Night, 1995, chose to strip the story of its magic, presenting a more grounded, historical drama focused on the romantic triangle between Arthur, Lancelot, and Guinevere. The 2004 film King Arthur went even further, attempting to offer a historically based version of Arthur as a Roman British commander. These films demonstrated the enduring appeal of the core story, even when its magical elements were removed. The advent of video games introduced an entirely new layer of interaction with the myth. They transformed the passive act of reading or watching into an active, immersive experience. The Arthurian world became a playground for players to explore. In role-playing games, RPGs, like Dark Age of Camelot 2001, players could choose a side, Britain, Celt, or Norse, and fight in a massive open-world version of the Arthurian kingdoms. Games like these allowed players to experience the camaraderie of the Round Table and the struggle for a kingdom on a grand scale. The tabletop RPG Pendragon offered an even deeper dive, allowing players to create their own knights and embark on their own quests, making them a part of the living legend. More modern action-adventure games have also used the myth as a rich backdrop. Tomb Raider, Legend 2006, wove the search for Excalibur and Avalon into its global treasure hunt narrative. Games like King Arthur, Knight's Tale 2022, present a darker, more tactical reinterpretation of the myth, where players must face off against nightmarish versions of Arthurian figures. These games often focus on the search for powerful artifacts from Avalon, making the island the ultimate endgame, the source of immense power that must be protected or harnessed. The player's journey to Avalon becomes a virtual pilgrimage, a direct and personal connection to the source of the magic. The impact of modern visual media on the myth is undeniable. While these adaptations may simplify complex themes for mass consumption, they have brought the myth to a wider audience than ever before. They have created a new generation of fans, a new group of keepers of the legend. The screen, whether it is in a cinema, on a television, or on a computer monitor, has become the new parchment for the saga of Avalon, ensuring that the story remains relevant and compelling for generations to come. Chapter 17. Symbolism and Esotericism. Sound of a single, sustained crystal bowl hum. A low, pulsating sound that feels like a heartbeat. The distant rustling of leaves and the gentle tolling of a bell. Beyond its place in Arthurian literature and its cinematic portrayals, the legend of Avalon holds a deeper, more profound significance. It is a powerful symbol, a landscape of the soul that transcends its physical location. For those who delve into the realms of esotericism and spiritual symbolism, Avalon is more than a mythical island. It is a representation of a personal quest for a higher state of consciousness, enlightenment, and spiritual perfection. It is a destination not for the body but for the soul. The island itself is a sacred archetype, a mirror reflecting humanity's deepest spiritual yearnings. The very name, Avalon, provides the first, most powerful clue to its symbolic meaning. Derived from the Celtic Isle of Apples, it immediately links the place to a pantheon of ancient, universal myths. In Celtic tradition, the apple tree was considered a source of spiritual knowledge and a gateway to the otherworld. In Greek mythology, the golden apples of the Hesperides granted immortality. In Norse myth, the goddess Idun tended to the magical apples that kept the gods forever young. Avalon, as the Isle of Apples, is a fusion of these timeless ideas. It represents a kind of Eden restored, a paradise of healing and eternal life that is accessible to those who are spiritually worthy. It is the antithesis of the mortal world's decay and suffering, a place where the soul can be restored and the spirit can be reborn. Avalon's symbolism is inextricably linked to the ancient, pre-Christian spiritual traditions of Britain. It is a powerful symbol of the old religion and the untamed magic of the land. Its matriarchal society, governed by the formidable priestess Morgana and her sisters, stands in direct contrast to the patriarchal, structured world of Arthur's Camelot and the new Christian faith. The legend of Avalon represents a world where the divine was seen as feminine, a world where the power of nature and the earth's cycles were venerated. In this esoteric view, the king's journey to Avalon is not just a retreat to a physical sanctuary, but a return to the roots of his own spiritual power, an acknowledgement that for all his Christian virtue and chivalric ideals, his true magic came from the ancient, pagan land. Modern esotericism has found a tangible anchor for these beliefs in the landscape of Glastonbury. The conical hill of the Glastonbury Tor is seen by many as a sacred site, a nexus of ley lines, ancient energy grids that are said to crisscross the globe. The Tor is not just a hill, it is a chakra of the earth, a place of immense spiritual power where the veil between worlds is at its thinnest. Below it lies the Chalice Well, a natural spring whose reddish water is said to be rich in iron. For spiritual seekers, this well is a powerful symbol of the merging of masculine and feminine energies, the masculine blood of Christ and the primordial, feminine life-giving energy of the earth itself. It is a place of pilgrimage for those who seek to connect with the divine feminine and the mystical heart of the land. Ultimately, Avalon is a psychological and spiritual landscape that we all seek. It is a powerful symbol of a lost innocence, a world without suffering, and a profound connection to a higher purpose. It represents a spiritual refuge, a place where we can transcend the chaos of the mundane world and find a sense of peace and wholeness. It is a destination for the soul, a place where we are permitted to believe in the impossible. This symbolism continues to resonate with contemporary spiritual movements, from Neopaganism to New Age thought. For these seekers, Avalon is not a fairy tale. It is a powerful roadmap to a more holistic, magical, and connected way of living. It is the enduring promise that the human spirit, like the king, can always find its way back home to a place of peace and rest. For centuries, the legend of King Arthur and Avalon has existed in the realm of myth, a story whispered through generations and written down by poets. But for just as long, a different kind of seeker has been on the hunt for the truth behind the legend. Armed not with a sword but with a trowel, the archaeologist has ventured into the misty landscapes of Britain, hoping to unearth the physical traces of Camelot, the Round Table, and the king who was and will be. This chapter delves into the tension between myth and history, exploring what the ground itself can and cannot tell us about the legendary king and the island to which he was carried. The historical period most often associated with Arthur, the 5th and 6th centuries, is one of the most enigmatic in British history. Often called the Dark Ages, it was a time of profound political fragmentation and widespread chaos following the departure of the Roman legions. Written records from this period are incredibly scarce, leaving a vast historical void. It is into this void that the myth of a single unifying king, a Dux Bellorum, or Duke of Battles, was born. The archaeological quest for Camelot is, in essence, a search for a great fortress that could have served as a center of power during this period of decline. The most compelling candidate for the historical Camelot is Cadbury Castle in Somerset. This massive Iron Age hill fort, with its imposing earthen ramparts, was the site of extensive archaeological digs in the 1960s. The findings were extraordinary. Archaeologists discovered the remains of a great timber hall and fortifications from the 5th to 6th centuries, the very period of Arthur. The scale of the construction was immense, suggesting that this was not a minor chieftain's fort, but the seat of a powerful warlord. For a brief, thrilling moment, it seemed that the historical Camelot had been found. But while the evidence proves that a powerful leader existed here, it provides no concrete proof that his name was Arthur. The stones and the pottery cannot tell us the names of the men who lived there. They can only tell us that a king once ruled from this place. The most famous discovery of all, however, remains shrouded in controversy. In 1191, the monks of Glastonbury Abbey claimed to have found the graves of King Arthur and Queen Guinevere. This finding, as discussed earlier, was a strategic move to boost the abbey's prestige and draw in pilgrims after a devastating fire. The monks described a deep burial, a massive oak coffin, and a lead cross with a Latin inscription. This event was a turning point. It gave the myth a physical anchor, a place for people to visit and believe. However, modern archaeological analysis has cast serious doubt on the legitimacy of the find, suggesting it was more likely a clever fabrication. The supposed burial site, when later excavated with modern tools, contained no evidence to support the monks' claims. It is a powerful example of how a myth can create a history, rather than the other way around. Other historical theories suggest that Arthur was not a single person, but a title or a composite of several different leaders. Some scholars point to Ambrosius Aurelianus, a Roman-British commander who led the fight against the Saxon invasions. Others suggest that the stories of Arthur are a combination of various heroic tales from different Celtic leaders. This view argues that while the mythical figure of Arthur may not have existed, the spirit and the values he represents were very real and were embodied by the brave men who fought to preserve a golden age of Britain. In the end, the archaeological search for a historical Arthur and a physical Avalon has proven to be a mostly unfulfilling quest. The earth is a graveyard for historical facts, and the myth of Avalon was never meant to be found with a spade. Its true power lies not in its historical accuracy, but in its ability to endure as a story. The absence of physical evidence allows the myth to remain eternal, adaptable, and a canvas for our hopes and dreams. The echoes of Avalon are not in the stones or the soil. They are in our stories, our art, and our enduring belief in a better world. The legend is true because we need it to be true. A myth is not an artifact to be placed in a museum. It is a living entity, an idea that breathes and evolves with the people who tell it. In our modern, technological, and often cynical world, it would be easy to assume that a tale of a magical island, a virtuous king, and mystical swords would have long ago faded into irrelevance. But the truth is quite the opposite. The legend of Avalon and the Arthurian saga continues to be a powerful, persistent force in our culture, a canvas onto which we project our deepest desires, fears, and hopes. The enduring legacy of Avalon is a testament to its timeless themes and its infinite adaptability. One of the most surprising and widespread legacies of the myth is its use in modern commerce and branding. The name Avalon has been co-opted to evoke a sense of mystique, high quality, and timelessness. It's used to name cars, luxury hotels, clothing lines, and even technology companies. The Toyota Avalon, for instance, borrows the name to suggest a sense of elegant, serene, and almost otherworldly comfort. This commercial use is a subtle but powerful tribute to the myth. It proves that the very sound of the name has come to symbolize a certain kind of perfection, a tranquil utopia that we aspire to possess in our own lives. The myth has become a cultural shortcut, a single word that conjures an entire world of meaning. The influence of the myth in popular music and literature is equally profound. From the progressive rock of the 1970s to the alternative music of today, artists have drawn inspiration from its rich tapestry. The legendary band Roxy Music chose to name their final melancholic album Avalon, using the island as a metaphor for a final, serene farewell. The band King Arthur and the Knights and countless folk and metal groups have named themselves after characters and places from the legend, keeping the story alive for new generations of listeners. In literature, the myth has been reinvented countless times, from Neil Gaiman's imaginative take in American Gods to modern fantasy novels that explore the myth from new angles, continuing to prove its endless versatility. The most fascinating aspect of Avalon's modern legacy is how it has been reinterpreted to reflect our own cultural anxieties and aspirations. In an age of environmental crisis, Avalon is often presented as a pristine, unspoiled paradise, a powerful symbol of nature untainted by human greed and technology. The quest for Avalon becomes a modern pilgrimage to reconnect with the earth and its ancient wisdom. In the realm of gender and social politics, the myth is no longer told exclusively from the perspective of its male heroes. Authors and artists have embraced figures like Morgana, not as a villain, but as a tragic heroine and a symbol of the divine feminine fighting against a world that has silenced her. Her quest to preserve the magic of Avalon resonates deeply with a modern desire for a more balanced and equitable world. The timeless prophecy of the once and future king also finds a powerful resonance in our modern political landscape. In a world often perceived as being in turmoil, marked by political corruption and social unrest, the idea of a sleeping hero waiting to return is a source of profound comfort. The myth of Arthur serves as a powerful allegory for a kind of political idealism that seems lost to us. It is a reminder that the values of justice, honor, and courage are never truly gone. They are simply dormant, waiting for us to awaken them. The myth suggests that every age has the potential for its own Arthur, its own golden age, and that the greatest darkness is always followed by the greatest light. The spiritual and esoteric legacy of Avalon continues to inspire a diverse range of modern spiritual movements, from Neopaganism to New Age thought. For these seekers, Avalon is a powerful symbol for a deeper connection to nature, the divine feminine, and a more holistic, magical view of the world. It is a place where they can find meaning in a reality they feel is increasingly devoid of it. The legacy of Avalon is not merely a tale from a distant past, it is a living, breathing part of our cultural heritage. It is a constant reminder that the ideals of a golden age are never truly gone. They are simply resting in the mists, waiting for us to rediscover them. We have journeyed far. We began in the misty reaches of ancient Britain, a world of bards and oral traditions. We witnessed the birth of a myth in the pages of medieval chronicles, a legend shaped by the pens of chroniclers and poets. We saw a king rise to build a kingdom of light, only to see it crumble under the weight of human frailty. We watched as magic receded from the world, leaving a void that was filled with both sorrow and a desperate hope. We followed a dying king on his final, sacred pilgrimage across a still lake, carried by mystical queens to an island of healing and immortality. And we saw how that island, Avalon, a place of myth and magic, became a timeless symbol for all that we yearn for. A paradise lost, a state of grace, a home for the soul. Throughout our journey, we've explored the tension between what was real and what was remembered. We've seen how a historical figure was transformed into an eternal ideal, how a physical place became a spiritual symbol, and how a story from the Dark Ages became a living, breathing part of our modern culture. We've seen Avalon in the high art of the Pre-Raphaelites, in the somber poetry of Tennyson, in the cinematic grandeur of Burman, and in the interactive realms of video games. Its legacy is everywhere, a subtle, persistent whisper in the background of our lives, a silent hum that resonates with something deep within our collective consciousness. But what is it, exactly, that this myth teaches us? It teaches us that our greatest dreams, our grandest ideals, are not always meant to be conquered. The fall of Camelot is a powerful lesson in the fragility of perfection. It reminds us that no matter how strong the walls, no matter how noble the code, no human endeavor is immune to the destructive power of ambition, jealousy, and betrayal. The kingdom, built on an impossible dream, was doomed from the start. And yet, the myth does not end in despair. It is a story of profound hope. It tells us that though the king may fall, the ideal he represents can never truly die. It simply retreats to a sacred place, waiting. The enduring power of the once and future king lies in this very idea. It is the ultimate testament to the human spirit's unwavering belief in a savior. It tells us that our greatest values, courage, justice, honor, and compassion, are not lost. They are simply dormant, sleeping in the mists of Avalon, waiting for a time of great peril to be reawakened. The myth gives us a sense of collective security, a belief that even in the darkest of times, our past glory is not gone. It is simply waiting for us to call upon it once more. The story of Arthur's final journey is a promise that every age has the potential for its own golden age. That every era of chaos and despair contains the seeds of a new beginning, a new king, a new Camelot. And so, as we conclude our journey, the echoes of Avalon are no longer just in the past. They are in you. By listening to this story, by reflecting on its meaning, you have become a part of its living history. You are now a keeper of the flame, a new guardian of the legend. The mythical island of Avalon is no longer just a place on an ancient map. It is a landscape of the human soul. It is the place we seek when we feel lost, the hope we cling to when we are in despair, and the promise that we will one day find our way back home. The king may be sleeping, but the legend is more alive than ever. So listen closely, and you too may hear the final echo in the mist, a call to a kingdom that was and will be.